Welcome to the Economic Rockstar Podcast with your host, Frank Conway, connecting brilliant minds in economics and finance.
Hello, Frank Conway here, and thanks very much for joining me once again on the Economic Rockstar Podcast. In this week's episode, I am so honoured to have Jim Rogers join me today. And some of you from the investment world might know Jim Rogers and may have some of his books or have read about him or even have seen him on TV such as Bloomberg and CNBC. Jim Rogers is an American businessman and financial commentator based in Singapore. He is the chairman of Rogers Holdings and Beeland Interests Incorporated. In 1973, Jim co-founded the Quantum Fund with George Soros, and having retired at the age of 37 after a number of successful years with Quantum, Jim spent some of his time travelling on a motorcycle around the world, a Guinness World Record, and one which is documented in Investment Biker, an international best-selling book written by Jim. He has also been a guest professor of finance at the Columbia Business School. In 1998, he created the Rogers International Commodities Index and has been an outspoken advocate of agriculture investments. Between 1999 and 2002, Jim set off again around the world for the second time, and on this occasion with his wife, who did another Guinness World Record journey, travelling 116 countries in a custom-made Mercedes. He wrote Adventure Capitalist following this around the world adventure. In 2007, he moved to Singapore due to the investment growth potential in Asia. And in this conversation with Jim, he shares with us some excellent advice on how you should approach investing and what the next 10 to 20 years could turn out for the global economy. He suggests that North Korea, Russia and agriculture are contrarian bets that will have positive payoffs for those of us willing to go against the crowd. I also asked Jim about his views on cryptos and blockchain and whether he has any advice for you if you feel stuck in your job or if you are undecided about what you should do if starting out on your career path. And if you want to check out all the books, links and resources mentioned by Jim in this episode, please check out economicrockstar.com/Jim Rogers. And thanks again for continuing to support the show by pressing play, downloading and listening to this podcast over the last 12 months. And I'm so grateful for all the new listeners who have found the podcast and are checking out the back catalogue of episodes. And again, support the show by sharing, downloading and even subscribing to the podcast on your favourite podcast platform. I hope this episode rounds off a nice year for you and get you thinking for the year to come, 2019. May all have a happy Christmas and a peaceful and prosperous new year. So enjoy this episode with Jim Rogers.
Many people just listen to their friends or hot tips or the internet or TV or something. Please do not do that. You're going to lose money if that's the way you invest. Well, one of the best things I can tell you is do not have a lot of debt and try to stay away from people that have a lot of debt. If you have a business, try not to sell to people who have debt, because if they get in trouble, you have trouble. So that's the main thing.
Hi, Jim. Welcome to the Economic Rockstar Podcast.
I'm delighted to be here, Frank. Nice to see you.
It's an absolute pleasure, and it's been a long time coming that I've wanted you on the podcast. I reached out to you about almost 4 years ago, and I'm so delighted that this has come to fruition now.
Well, I am too, Frank. I mean, 4 years is a long time to wait.
I have your number of your books. I followed what you were doing when I first got into trading. I must have been only about 12 years ago, and trading on commodities. And I suppose I'd love to know where you're coming from in terms of how you got started. Because in your bio, you didn't have, as you mentioned, you didn't know how stocks worked or how to trade stocks. And then you ended up being one of the most successful commodity traders.
Well, Frank, I do a lot besides commodities. I do stocks, bonds, currencies. Yes, some people seem to know me as a commodity person, but all my career I've done everything. So, yes, we can talk about commodities, or we can talk about anything you want.
Oh, fantastic! So, how did you get into trading?
Well, I didn't. When I was a senior at university, I was going to go to law school and business school and medical school. I was a confused young man like many, many other people. So one day I went down to the office at my university that came and interviewed students to see if they wanted a job. I interviewed several people for the experience. One of them happened to be on Wall Street, and I liked him and he liked me, so he offered me a summer job, and I said, fine. But when I went to Wall Street, Frank, I didn't know anything about Wall Street. I knew it was in New York. I knew something bad had happened in 1929. I didn't know there was a difference in stocks and bonds. I knew nothing. But I got there, and I soon fell in love because here was a place that would pay me to follow my passions, which was what was going on in the world and figure out the world. And they'd pay me a lot if I did a good job. So I didn't go to medical school. I didn't go to law school. I didn't go to business school. I went to Wall Street as soon as I could.
Well, that was a great move. And it was soon after that you met with George Soros.
Yeah, 2 or 3 years later. Yes.
How did you connect, or did you find conversations with one another very invigorating, or did you feel that you had something common that was quite unique to you?
Well, first of all, Frank, that was 47 years ago.
Yeah.
Might as well ask me about my first wife. I mean, it's a long time ago. We certainly got along. We worked well together, and we were there together for 10 years or so and had a reasonably good performance. You
set up the Quantum Fund with George, and that still exists anyway, and it's in some form or another.
Oh yeah, as far as no, I think it's just his own family money now. I think he closed it as a public fund a year or two. I don't know. You can look it up. I don't pay that much attention, but the fund did go on for many years. Yes.
Then you decided to take this worldwide road trip, which when I first came across it, I was quite fascinated that you could actually do something like this, and you did it twice anyway.
Well, since I was a teenager, I used to say, I really want to see the world. I want to go around the world on my motorcycle. Now, I had no clue that I actually was going to ever do it. I thought it was just teenage or young man talk. But when I retired, that was the first thing I wanted to do, was to go around the world on a motorcycle, which was impossible in the 80s. You may remember the Soviet Union and Red China and stuff like that. But I set out to figure out a way to do it. And lo and behold, I did it. And then that wasn't enough, so I went around the world again in a car. But it's a lifelong dream of mine to see the world, to see it close to the ground. And so I did it, to my shock and delight.
You must have been obviously focused in on certain economics and finance related markets because you're coming from that perspective. So you would have been able to see opportunities. I was recently speaking to my previous guest, Jennifer Murdashvili, and she's in Uzbekistan at the moment, and she sees opportunities. And you actually came up in that conversation that I mentioned. You traveled the world and you had come across opportunities to buy up a number of stocks in a stock exchange when you visited some countries.
Well, yes. I mean, the nature of who I am. I mean, I could go through a country and say, oh, gosh, that's nice. The fields are nice. The monuments are nice, etc. But when I see something, because I've been investing all my life, I see something promising, then I don't just say hello. I stop. I do some research and often make an investment if I find that things are going to be good. But I guess that's the nature of who I am. I tell that to people, and most people explain to me they just don't think that way. If they see something, they say, gosh, look at that. And that's about the end of it. But if people learn to be a little more attentive to what they see, they might wind up making investments and they might be successful.
Usually people make a mistake to have this herd-like mentality because we feel very comfortable in crowds and we're going to sensationalist headlines that tend to give us maybe stock market picks such as abbreviations like FANGs, and it's when people are all in, usually when people are all in, that's perhaps where you have to make a contrarian decision as to go against the crowd, which is a very difficult thing to do. How do you weigh up situations like that?
Well, you said an important thing. It is difficult to go against the crowd. Everybody knows that, including me. I have learned in my life, it's usually best to go against the crowd, even if you don't know what's going on. I'd rather go against the crowd than with the crowd. But especially if you do some research, you will probably wind up going against the crowd, because most people have not been successful following other people. But I don't just go against the crowd to go against the crowd. When I see them all going one way, I do some research to see if maybe they're wrong, and they usually are. But I once I've done enough research to know, or think that I know that I'm right, then I invest.
One of your decisions was to move to Singapore. Was there something similar in terms of seeing the opportunity before anyone else did?
Well, I can certainly tell you, when I told people in New York I was leaving for Singapore, first, most of them had never heard of Singapore. If they had, they thought it was in China, and they certainly could not conceive that somebody would leave a good life in New York to go to Singapore, wherever it was and whatever it was. But I'd done some enough traveling and enough research to know that Asia was the 21st century is going to be the century of Asia, especially of China. And so off we set. We looked at many Chinese cities. Most of them were too polluted, so we wound up in Singapore. I want my children to speak Mandarin is the short answer. And so we moved to Singapore because I know that I know that Mandarin is going to be extremely important in the 21st century.
When I read that first, a number of years back, I decided my son, I said, look, we'll enroll in some Mandarin classes, because I got the advice from one of your books. And he didn't take it too lightly at all.
Well, one of the things I've learned is you pretty much have to make them do it. If they start doing it very early, they don't know. They just think, well, that's what everybody else does too, and so they go along with it. You know, if I'd had a 14-year-old girl or a 14-year-old boy, and I'd said, let's take Mandarin classes, I'm sure I would have had a gigantic opposition and probably not success. But if they start when they're babies, they don't know what's going on. They just think this is the way the world is. True.
Maybe 5 or 6 was even too old for that, given that I was giving up a Saturday morning to do it.
No, you're exactly right. And one of the reasons I moved to Asia was because I ran into so many people, especially Chinese, who said that when they were kids, their parents spoke to them in Mandarin, sent them to Saturday classes for Mandarin, et cetera, and when they were about 8, 9, 10 years old, they just rebelled. They refused to do it anymore because it wasn't cool. Mm-hmm. And so I realized, so if I'm serious, I better take her to a place where she has no choice but to speak Mandarin. And so I did. So she didn't have any choice. And I had another little girl born here in Singapore. She just grew up thinking, well, this is the way the world is. I've got a father who doesn't speak Mandarin, but everybody else does. And so, they both now understand, and they both realize, and they're both becoming stars because their Mandarin is so good.
Jim, I don't necessarily go looking for stock market tips or anything like that. I don't do that. But do you want to have a discussion maybe on what's going on at the moment regarding the economic or political cycle and how it might affect stock markets or commodity markets and what we might anticipate in the future?
Well, it's been over 10 years. I'm going to use America since it's the biggest economy and the biggest market. Since America's had a recession or a bad stock market, a bear market. Now, that's the longest in American history. It doesn't have to go bad in 10 years or less, but it always has. Throughout history, we've never had a expansion that's lasted this long. So just on the odds, we're overdue for something to go wrong. And it is going to go wrong. It's probably going wrong right now as we speak. The problem is, Frank, we usually don't know these things until later. In 2007, Iceland went bankrupt. Well, nobody knew what Iceland was, if they even paid attention. And so then Ireland went bankrupt. And then Bear Stearns went bankrupt a few months later. Then Northern Rock in the UK went bankrupt. And then a few weeks later, Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. Well, by then, this is several months, over a year, by then everybody knew something was wrong. And that's usually the way it works. It starts where we're not watching, and over a few months or years it snowballs. We may already be in it. I suspect we are. I know I know we are in it. You know, we already had Latvia go bankrupt, Venezuela, Argentina, Turkey. You know, there are plenty of signs out there of small places that nobody's noticing and are not too significant starting to snowball and go bankrupt. Well, it's going to work its way into the major markets. It seems to be working its way there now. Maybe we'll have one more big rally, but as far as I can see, that's the end. Then we're going to have a very serious a declining market.
A number of people have mentioned this, all right. I know I wouldn't be an expert in terms of trading or anything like that, but you do get this sense in that having lived it and having been being aware of it, and maybe what keeps me in touch is that I lecture on some of the topics that deal with this type of thing, like contagion and black swan and events and things like that. So I'm kind of grateful that I'm kept in, or I'm being made aware to look out for signs or to even analyze in a little way. But then having to put your money where your mouth is a very difficult thing to do.
Well, don't do it unless you know what you're doing. That's the first thing I want to tell you. Many people just listen to their friends or hot tips or the internet or TV or something. Please do not do that. You're going to lose money if that's the way you invest. Wait until you know a lot about something. Do your homework. And if you yourself know a lot about something, then maybe you'll make an investment. But don't listen to me. Don't listen to anybody. Don't listen to anybody except yourself. Exactly. Otherwise, just do nothing.
Yeah, I 100% agree. That's why I said at the beginning, I don't look for stock tips or anything like that, but just maybe have a discussion on things that's going on. And one thing that's really we see at the moment is maybe falling or low prices in commodities. I do this simulation game with some students, master's level students, and we look at, trading derivatives or equities and commodities and so on. And I think it was back in October, I just suggested shorting oil, but we got stopped out on a trade. I think it was about $72 a barrel for WTI, and it hit a high of 75, but suddenly it's all the way down to about 47 now. People might claim to have economic fundamentals associated with this type of pricing, given the stockpiling of oil reserves by the US. But these are just, again, headlines, aren't they, that tend to come to us, and there might be more to it.
Well, first you've learned one of the very important lessons about investing. You might be right, and if you have the timing wrong, you're still going to lose money. You were right about oil, clearly, right? Just as right as you could be. Timing was just off by 2 or 3 weeks. If you had timed it a little later, or if you'd been able to stay with the trade, you'd have made a whole lot of money by now. So that's a very important lesson to learn. Don't worry, I've learned it many times.
And it's something I've learned as well 10, 11 years ago. Again, I got that sense of markets topping, but I never closed on my positions. And one of the trades I remember being in was in wheat. And I think wheat was something like $14 a bushel. And again, this plummeted, as we all know, what happened as a result of that. So when prices are at all-time lows or at lows, people fear buying into them, but they present opportunities if you do your research, as you mentioned, Jim.
Well, there's no question. But again, I want to repeat first, if you don't know what you're doing, don't do anything. Don't just go following your hot tips or your instincts or something. Do your research. But a very, very important thing we all have to learn is that you've got to go against the crowd. And when you're terrified, it's probably a good time to, when everybody else is terrified anyway, it's probably a good time to invest. Just as when everybody is exuberant, it's a good time to go short. You went short oil, tried anyway, because and the reason, I don't know if you understood this, but the reason it was up was because everybody was so enthusiastic and positive about oil. The mood was bullish. Well, you were right. Again, so you were right, but you have learned the lesson of timing, which I have learned many times.
Jim, what is it like in Singapore right now in terms of the vibrancy of people and the confidence that's going on in the economy there, or even the local economy around you?
Well, Singapore is still doing well. Things have slowed down a little bit. I mean, nothing like they've slowed down in some other countries, for instance. But people, I get the sense that people know, oh, guys, something might be going wrong. Something might be going wrong, and maybe we better get worried too. But I mean, it's nothing like Latvia or something where everybody's very despondent and down, or Argentina or Turkey or some of the other places where, it hits you in the face every time you walk out the door. But people in Singapore seem to feel maybe something's going wrong, starting to go wrong.
Okay. Is it because is this a kind of internal shock, or would it be more so the influence of what could be happening in China?
Well, since we are close to China, and there are many Chinese here, of course, they get part of that from just their friends up the road, up in China. So yes, but it's not just in China. Things in Malaysia seem to be softening up. Our other neighbor, Indonesia, things to be softening up. So it's starting to happen, and it seems to be happening many places. What
preparations would you have in place, if any, in this case of something happening, say perhaps real estate or commodities or investments, equities or bonds?
Well, first, everybody should not have much debt, because in my view, the next time we have a problem, it's going to be the worst in my lifetime. It's going to be very bad because debt has built up so much all over the world. So the best thing, one of the best things I can tell you is do not have a lot of debt, and try to stay away from people that have a lot of debt. If you have a business, try not to sell to people who have debt, because if they get in trouble, you have trouble. So that's the main thing. The second thing is, please do not do anything that you don't understand. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to anybody. But if you know something that you know a lot about, and you know it's a good place to put your money, do so. Because one reason is because when things start going wrong, Frank, people don't know what to do. If they don't know why they bought it in the first place, and then things start going wrong, they don't know what to do when things start going wrong. So it's very important to only invest in what you yourself know a lot about, or don't invest.
That's true, yeah. Keep money in cash, even though, for long term the purchasing power could fall, but true, don't invest.
Well, yes, but I will say yes, and having cash over many decades is probably not the right thing to do, but it's better to make 1% on your money than to lose 5 or 6% every year or more. So I would urge you to try it if you don't believe me. It's better to be solid and sound, especially in bad times. If you can get through bad times when everybody else is suffering, you're really going to make a lot of money on the other side.
I just wonder how the central banks could react to another situation where there are high levels of debt and it can't be repaid, because the monetary policy easing that they've gone through 10 years ago or over the last number of years may not be as effective anymore, and they might not have the tools to soften policy in order to respond to this.
You're going to find that the central banks are going to, as things get bad, they're going to try to do something. And every time they try to do something, the markets will rally for a while or stop going down. But it's not going to work because, Frank, unfortunately, you do remember in 2008, we had a problem because of too much debt. Well, since 2008, the debt everywhere has skyrocketed. The central bank in America's balance sheet alone is up 500% in 10 years. I mean, these are, if I had said this sentence anywhere in the world 25 years ago, people would have put me in the nut house, because it couldn't happen. It cannot happen, but it has happened. So we need to be very worried about all of this debt. And whenever the central banks try to do something, and they will try, that's what they think they're supposed to do. Usually they do the wrong thing. They will do the wrong thing again, and things will get worse. Do not be complacent.
The debt typically coming from China?
Well, as I said, the American Central Bank alone has increased its balance sheet by 500%. So the main culprit is the U.S. But, China, too, has built up a lot of debt. In 2008, when China had a lot of money saved for a rainy day, it started raining, and they started spending the money and helped save the world. Unfortunately, Now China has debt too. Nothing like America, say, on a per capita basis or GDP basis, but China has a lot of debt too. So that's one less person, or one less country to come and save the world next time around. And by the way, China in Beijing, they have been trying, or they are making people cut back on their debt. And that's one reason things are starting to slow down around the world.
Jim, recently I've been looking at gold. And we know gold, there's only so much gold available out there that's in storage. And there's a bullion website that sells gold, but they'll store it for you for a fee, whatever it is, 1.5% per annum. How do I know if I was to buy this gold and I don't receive the physical quantity? Just say I wanted to buy, say 400 ounces of gold, and I don't have the physical quantity, and I wanted to actually cash in, or I wanted to get the physical gold. Is this something that could cause a problem if everybody tries to cash in and take their physical gold? How do I know that I'm just putting money into a Ponzi scheme? Well, even if it's a genuine website.
Well, first of all, you've said some dangerous things. You said, "How do you know?" Don't do it if you don't know. I will repeat: if you don't know, don't do it. Certainly, you should do a lot of homework on anybody. You're talking about giving 400 ounces of gold is a lot of money. You're talking about giving somebody a lot of money, and if you don't know them and haven't done a lot of research, please don't do it. Give it to me. I promise you, I'm a better risk than they are. No. You must be extremely careful, especially with lots of money like that, and especially with something that you don't know. Now, many people, not many because they're not many, but most of the people who do this sort of thing will give you an audit. You can get an audited statement about your gold, that it's actually there, then it's actually yours. Just be very careful. The world is full of stories. History is full of stories. Full of stories, Frank, where people have done just what you said, given somebody a lot of money and found out later, oh my gosh, now I'm broke.
The vault is empty.
And many of these people don't start out as crooks, but then they get tempted by lots and lots of easy money. And so just be very careful, because there's, as I said, the world is full of stories where people get broke because they don't do the right thing.
But say the gold that I have, if an audit is done, how do I know that someone else doesn't have that piece that I have?
Well, that's what an audit's for. Now, yes, you're exactly right. But if it's a proper auditor, they will be able to say that they can check the company's accounts, and the company's accounts show 10,000 ounces sold and 10,000 ounces in the vault. Chances are everything is okay. But you're exactly right. Somebody could say, well, we've sold 10,000 ounces. Here are the 10,000 ounces. Do a very good game of changing the books. And later on, you find out, well, gosh, they've actually sold 30,000 ounces and put the rest of the money in their pocket. I cannot emphasize enough. Please do your homework no matter what you do with your money. Otherwise, do nothing with it except put it in the bank.
Jim, you retired at the age of 37. This is something that, well, you retired from Quantum Fund and the work that you were doing, but you're still active in trading. So that's obviously is still seen as retirement because you enjoy doing this type of work, or it wouldn't even call it work, would you?
I don't call it work. For me, it's fun. And that's something else people should learn. I tell university kids all the time, they say, what should I study? And I try to tell them, just figure out your own passion and study what you love. Then you'll never go to work. You'll wake up every day and start having fun. So please don't listen to your parents, your professors, your friends. Do what you love and do that, and you'll never go to work a day in your life. And those are usually the people that are most successful because they're having so much fun. And even if they're not successful, they don't care because they're having fun. They're happy.
And you're enjoying Singapore. You're going to be there for the near future.
Yeah, unless I get hit over the head or something. No. No. I'm very keen. We're all my kids like it here. My wife likes it here. No, we're all quite happy being in Singapore.
Say in some countries, say for example, Russia, where not many people would talk fondly of the Russian market. And I personally don't even hear any discussion on the Russian market. But is this something like in a situation, if you do your work and people aren't into that market just yet, could that be seen as an opportunity to go into compared to, say, the United States?
Yes, well, the United States stock market is at near all-time highs, as you point out, or as I point out. It's down maybe 10% now, but Russia's hated. Very, very, very few people invest in Russia. Russia has not been booming. Russia's market is not at all-time highs. That is sometimes a good place to go. It's always a good place to investigate. Often it's a good place to invest when nobody's there and it's cheap. But something can be cheap and stay cheap a long, long time. Just because it's cheap doesn't mean you should invest there. There has to be a reason to invest there.
And some of the similar countries around the stands, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, that are growing from a low base, if you want to say a low GDP per capita base relative to neighboring countries or the Western economies. And some people might see opportunities there. Do you see something similar? Or how did you experience your trip going through some of those countries?
Well, when I went through the first time, it was still part of the Soviet Union, so there weren't many great opportunities. I could see the potential, huge natural resources, and no debt. I mean, nobody would lend money to Joseph Stalin or to Nikita Khrushchev. Nobody would lend money to any of those ex-Soviet states. So there were opportunities, but not much I could do about it. The second time, of course, you could see that they'd gotten rid of communism, and there were opportunities. Most of those countries did not have stock markets back then, and I mainly invest in stock markets. But Uzbekistan, which you mentioned, has been beaten down, ruined by the dictators. There's probably fantastic opportunities there, but not really stock market opportunities. And I mainly invest in markets. But sure, if you want to go to Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan, has gigantic opportunities right now for anybody who wants to go. And Kazakhstan actually has a stock market too. So if you want to go there and do it, North Korea, go to North Korea. North Korea is the most exciting country in the world right now, as far as I'm concerned. So go to North Korea. Go to Venezuela.
Have you been to these countries?
Yeah, I've been to North Korea twice. Been to Venezuela a few times. Been to Kazakhstan at least 6 or 7 times. Yeah, but just because I've been there doesn't mean they're good investments. And I have not invested in Kazakhstan, but I certainly see plenty of opportunities for somebody who's not lazy and somebody who knows what they're doing.
Regarding North Korea, was it difficult to get entry into? Did you have to be interviewed? Did you have to fill out a lot of papers?
Well, the first time we were going, we had to fill out papers. Yeah, it's not like applying for a visa in America or something. Nothing that complicated. But we had permission, and then they closed it and said that there were problems in North Korea with the harvest, and so they weren't allowing people to come. But the next year, we did go. We filled out the papers, and everything went fine. There were no tourists there. We were essentially by ourselves, my wife and I, when we went. But we went to see they have something, they put on games every year, a gymnastic exhibition, which is the most extraordinary human scene I've ever seen. There's nothing quite like it. I mean, 100,000 people, and it's just astonishing what they can do. Of course, they don't have anything else to do in Kazakhstan. It's not as though they're going down to the beer hall and drinking all night or the disco or something. So, yes, it was not easy. We did get in. They canceled. Went the next year, and it was a great time. And in 2013, I went again. This time I went by myself, because I was looking and still am looking for opportunities in North Korea. Unfortunately, at the moment, Americans are not allowed to go to North Korea. At least the U.S. government says they're not, and I don't want to fight the U.S. government. So it's difficult for me, but for people who are not U.S. citizens, I mean, my gosh, get on the next plane. You don't have to compete with the Americans. Wouldn't you like to invest in an economy where you don't have to compete with the Americans or the Japanese? True. Japanese are not allowed to go, nor the South Koreans. 3 of the world's great competitors are out of the market. America, okay. Japan, and South Korea. So go. Very little competition.
So they'll welcome an Irishman.
They certainly would. By all means, you should go.
That's good advice, Jim. Because my sister is over in Hong Kong, and again, people there were suggesting to her, look into North Korea.
Well, I would suggest you get on the plane and go there. Not just look into it, go. I don't know what your sister is interested in or what she's knowledgeable about, but, go and open an Irish pub. You'll get rich. You'll be the first and only for a long time. You'll have a boom on your hands.
I'm laughing here, but that's the typical response that people may have. You said there that if American debt has gone up 500% 10 years ago, you would have been laughed at. But in hindsight, looking back on it, maybe 10, 20 years time, if I look back on this conversation, I could say, Jim, you were 100% correct.
Well, I mean, I know I'm correct, but you try it out, and we can talk in 10 years. We can talk in 20 years. Korea, as it opens up, North Korea is where China was about 1980 or 81. It's it's just opening. It's opening slowly, but it's happening. It's too late for me to invest in China in 1981, but Korea is where China was then. And as Korea opens, an open Korea, united Korea, will be the most exciting country in the world because you have 80 million people right on the Chinese border. And the Northerners have huge natural resources, and they have disciplined, cheap, educated labor. Very cheap, educated, disciplined labor. You combine that with the South with massive amounts of capital and know-how and expertise right on the Chinese border. It's going to be fabulous. The Japanese are against it because the Japanese know they will not be able to compete with the United Korea, but boy, it's going to be very exciting. So tell your sister to get on the next bus and go to North Korea. Especially
the way South Korea had evolved over the last number of decades. The approaches they took on when they developed some of their industries. Say, for example, they suggested to LG to move from textiles to TVs and so on, and that worked out for them extremely well. So if they apply fairly similar principles in the North, there could, as you suggested, a boom in terms of economic growth.
There's no question about that. As recently as 1970, North Korea was actually richer than South Korea. Communism ruins everything, and communism ruined North Korea. But it literally was richer than South Korea as recently as 40, 50 years ago. So now the two countries together have a great future.
Do you worry about don't necessarily, I'll rephrase that because you might not worry at all. Would you be concerned for some countries who have neglected their industrial side of the economy and gone more for services? Because it seems to be more of a backbone in terms of economic growth and development. No, it depends on what people are good at. Many countries in history have proven that if they do what they're best at, then they will be successful countries, whether it's coal or oil or cotton or manufacturing or services. Switzerland doesn't have much manufacturing. It has some, but not much. But Switzerland is a pretty vibrant economy with lots of services. So you can make it either way. Singapore has, not much manufacturing. It's a small country, certainly has no land and no agriculture. So if you find what you're good at and you emphasize what you're good at, you will have a success. Regarding land and agriculture, this is something that you would have said recently about buying into, and you suggested that farmers could be the ones driving the Lamborghinis and not Wall Street traders. Yes, the agriculture has been a disaster for 35 years or so. The average age of farmers in America is 58. Nobody wants to be a farmer. In Japan, it's 66. Canada is the oldest in recorded history. Australia is 58. The highest rate of suicide in the UK is in agriculture. You probably know lots of Indian farmers commit suicide. It's a disaster. More people in America study public relations than study agriculture. So either we're not going to eat anymore and not wear clothes,
or something's going to happen to make agriculture more attractive. We've had long cycles in history when the people who made real goods were captains of the universe, and we've had long periods when they were disasters. Well, we've had a disaster for a long time, and then now it is starting to change again, in my view.
Again, I've noticed that in Ireland, nobody wanted to be in farming, and this is because of the Celtic Tiger, that name that was put on us. And there has been a decline, and also the average age of farmers had gone up, and people had left rural areas to go into urban areas or emigrate. But then once that came about, you started to hear, I don't know whether I just don't want to say stories, but you like numbers for colleges, agricultural colleges had gone up. There was more young people wanted to get back into farming, and I think that in a way, the recession that we've had when it came to the farm, I could be wrong, but when it came to farming, it was more of a blessing in that younger people went back to the farm.
Well, that's as I said, there are plenty of opportunities there now. So if you don't like whatever you're doing, anybody listening to this show, maybe, and you like being outdoors, or you like, working with real things, you might consider going back home and becoming a farmer. Buy yourself a farmer. Learn how to drive. Buy yourself a farm. Learn how to drive a tractor. It could be very interesting and very exciting.
Jim, have you ever been to Ireland?
Oh, yes. Let's see. My first trip to Ireland was 1964, before you were born. And I've been there many, many times since. And I'm quite keen on Ireland.
Have you were assuming I was born after 1964 then, or is this...
Yes, I'm sure you were. I'm sure you were. It's a wonderful place, north and south. I've been to both.
Yeah, these are very testing times at the moment regarding the border and the Brexit that we have. So there's, again, difficulties or people anticipating what could happen next. And, you can already apply that to the economic and political landscape as you would regarding stock markets. Should people prepare? Should we just wait and see and then react to it? Do we get overexcited when this hits headlines?
Well, the Irish have been there for 2,000 or 3,000, 4,000 years, doing quite well on their own. I certainly think Brussels should get out of it. London should get out of it too. And you guys can figure it out on your own. Ireland would be a much better place if you could run your own affairs rather than, God knows, Brussels. They've messed up just about everything they've touched. So I have confidence that the Irish are going to figure this out one way or the other. There's not going to be a great Irish war in 2020. Don't worry.
That'll be a 100-year anniversary actually to our Civil War.
Yes, I know. Well, that's one reason I said 2020.
Jim, I'd love to know if you have any advice. I know you've given us plenty here during this episode, but for somebody, say a young graduate who is looking to work in, I don't know, trading, investments, whatever it might be, someone might have an archaeology background that happen to listen to this. What advice would you have?
Figure out what you love. If you love finance, I'm bearish on finance. Finance is going to be a backwater for the next 20 years or so. But if you love it, go. Do it, and you'll be successful. When I went to Wall Street, it was certainly a backwater. I didn't know it was a backwater. I'm glad I wasn't smart enough to know. I just knew I loved it, and it turned out okay. So I would say the same to your archaeology graduate. Figure out what you love the most and do it. If you want to be a gardener, become a gardener. Don't listen to me. People who love gardening have a passion. Their parents say, we didn't raise you to be a gardener. The professors say, oh my God, we didn't educate you to be a farmer, you're a gardener. And your friends will all say, what? Did you hear about Frank? He went and became a gardener. But you'll never go to work. You'll be happy every day. Someday you'll be the gardener at Buckingham Palace. Someday you'll have a chain of garden stores all over Europe. You'll be listed on the London Stock Exchange. You'll be the richest person you know. And your parents will all say, or both say, we used to give you seeds when you were a child because we knew how much you liked gardening. We could see and your professors will say, You remember how we encouraged you to go into gardening, and your friends will all call you and say, "Oh my God, we see you're the richest man we know. We need a job." It'll turn out fine in the end. And as I say, and if you don't become the richest man, your friends know it doesn't matter. You're happy. So what do you care?
That's exactly what I read a book recently, Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, and that's exactly what happened to him.
Yeah, he started having fun.
He did.
He also got rich. But as I say, even if you don't get rich, you don't care.
True. If you could time travel, Jim, and step into the DeLorean and time travel, what era would you like to go back to, or who would you like to see?
I'd rather go forward. Let's see, maybe I'm just thinking of, maybe 1815 when Europe was laid waste after the Napoleonic Wars, and he was about to enter a century of very little war and of great prosperity, great opening up. That would be a good time to be 20 years old, because unless you were a fool, you were going to get very, very rich, especially if you were in the UK. One time there in the 1830s or so, the English Midlands had something like 80% of the machines in the world. The Industrial Revolution was just starting, and it was centered in the UK. And my God, the amount of money they had and the amount of business they had was staggering. It was Chinese history here in the last 20 or 30 years has been somewhat comparable, but nothing like what happened in the UK in the 1830s. That's a good place to start. I think I'll stop there.
Yeah. Would you have a book that you'd like to recommend? I'll put your books up on links. For example, Investment Biker. The ones I have are A Bull in China. I've had Hot Commodities and A Gift to My Children. So I'll put those links up there for people to check out. But do you have any book or books that you've mostly gifted or that you would recommend people to tap into?
Well, my most recent book is called Street Smart, so I'm going to shamelessly recommend that. But no, it depends on your interest. People often ask me if I'm teaching my children investing. No, I'm not. If and when they come to me and they want to learn about investing, of course I will. But I have learned that the people who learn the best and the fastest are people who are very interested in something. If you're interested in back to gardening, if you're interested in gardening, you're going to learn about gardening on your own. Even if I sit and teach you every morning about the stock market, you don't care. You're going to go and learn about gardening. So it depends on their interest. Find the best books in your field of interest and do it. Then do more.
Yeah. It's a shame, and I'm sure I've experienced this, or maybe I'm in it, but when someone gets certain education and end up in a field, you're pretty much pigeonholed or boxed into that particular profession, and you have to, not that you have to, but it's felt for the majority of people that that's where you're going to end up being, and you need to live up to the expectations of that discipline or that profession. And it's very hard for a lot of people to break away from. But again, as you said, if you have a passion for something, maybe pivot and look into that even in your own spare time. And then when you're ready to go for it. Yeah.
It's wonderful. It's the best advice you can give anybody, is to do something like that, and they'll be happy and successful. As I say, even if they're not successful, they don't care because they're happy.
Jim, can I ask you on one more kind of area of discussion on cryptocurrency? If that's okay. Yeah. So, for example, we've seen the all-time highs on some of these coins like Bitcoin and Ethereum and Litecoin a year ago today, and now they're not at all-time lows, but they're at pretty much lows. And I get a sense that people are getting excited about this again. Is this something, and I find it hard to understand. I do understand in a way, in my limited understanding of it, how they work and why they're there, but to get a fair value or fundamental value on a coin, because a lot of it's perhaps driven by speculation. Is this something, again, going by your advice, don't get into it unless you know it? Or where do you come from in terms of cryptocurrency?
They're all going to go to zero.
Yeah.
I wouldn't bother with them.
So
did I make myself clear?
Yeah, there's no point asking any more on that then, because going to zero. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
We're wasting.
Yeah, because
in my view, people are wasting their time and money. Many of them already have gone to zero, as you probably know, Frank.
Yeah.
Many have disappeared already. They're all going to disappear before this is over.
I was speaking to Kevin Kelly of Wired magazine a few months ago, and he pretty much said the same thing. He wasn't bullish at all on crypto, or even on blockchain.
Well, blockchain is different. I am optimistic about blockchain, but not crypto. As I say, they're all going to disappear. Many of them already have disappeared, and you're going to see a lot more disappear. You're going to see them all disappear before it's over.
My feeling is that a government, say maybe the US government, could come out with some form of a coin that, well, it kind of in a way is out there, because we pay a lot of goods using debit cards or online transactions, where we don't actually transfer over the physical fiat currency. But something that Venezuela that introduced their own petro coin. And people are worried about that, because they've moved people's savings into it, the pensions, and they're worried that it could go to zero.
First of all, blockchain is different from cryptocurrencies, as I want to emphasize that. But second, there's no question that money is going to be on the internet. Already, if you go to China, people don't have money. I tried to buy an ice cream the other day. Poor woman couldn't sell me ice cream because I had money. I had renminbi. I had Chinese money.
No way.
She couldn't take it. I had to give her my phone to put my little spot on her little spot. Well, I didn't have the spot. I had money. She couldn't take money. She gave me the ice cream in the end. I wish I'd been buying a Mercedes or something. But so money is disappearing. China's far ahead of the rest of the world in this, and it's going to disappear. But it's going to be government money. It's not. It used to be 100 years ago that you and I could do anything we wanted, use anything we wanted for money: seashells, gold, banknotes from any bank, because many banks printed their own banknotes back in those days. But then in the 30s, the Bank of England, which was the most important bank in the world at the time, said it is now an act of treason if you use anything for money except our money. Well, guess what? People stop using other things for money, because treason means they execute you if you're committing an act of treason. So there will be money, and it'll be on the internet, but it's going to be government money in the end. And people, the crypto guys say to me all the time, well, we're smarter than the government. And they are much smarter than the government. But the government's got the guns. I don't like the fact that the government can control us that way, and does control us that way. It'd be better if we could use anything we wanted as money. But unfortunately, governments don't like that, and they've got the guns, and we're going to all play their way in the end.
Jim,
again, I don't like it, Frank, but go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's an absolute pleasure. I think I might have taken up too much of your time, and I would love to keep going, but I don't want to take advantage. Is there anything else you'd like to part with or suggest?
Just be careful. Very difficult times coming all over the world, so everybody should be very careful. Get knowledgeable. Once you get knowledgeable, you'll get worried, and once you get worried, do something to protect yourself.
That's great, Jim. Thanks very much, and I really appreciate you coming on. You are an economic rock star, and if you want to, if you want to check out all the links, books, and resources mentioned in this episode by Jim, check out economicrockstar.com/Jim Rogers. And
Thank you, Frank.
I meant to actually say to you, Jim, your name Beeland, that's a middle name that you have, is it? I never came across it before.
Well, it's an old family name. The Beelands have been around a long time. They came from England. I guess somebody at one point had bees. I hope so. I hope they had a lot of bees. Because
I was going to say it's very ironic, given that you're into recommending agriculture, and it's like the land of milk and honey.
Well, yeah, I hope. Okay, Frank, let's do it again sometime.
Oh, well, thanks very much, Jim.
Thank you.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
very much. All the best. Good night. Economic Rockstar is a free podcast that does not exclude anyone from listening as long as they have a device to listen, download or stream. I have many listeners from all parts of the world, and I truly am pleased to know that the Economic Rockstar podcast unites all of you through the common theme of economics. I strive to commit to releasing an episode each week and aim to develop Economic Rockstar into much more than just a podcast. Patreon is a platform that gives you, the listener of the Economic Rockstar podcast, the opportunity to express your appreciation of the show by committing a financial reward for as little as $1 a month. Patreon allows me, the creator of the Economic Rockstar podcast, to be rewarded and paid by you so I can continue with the running costs of the show and to reinvest and expand the podcast into other platforms or mediums in the future. To find out more on how you can help the Economic Rockstar podcast and have your name added to the supporters list on my website, please check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/Economic Rockstar or visit the supporters page on the Economic Rockstar website. If you enjoyed this podcast, why not leave some feedback or comments on the show notes page on economicrockstar.com, where you can also sign up and be a member of the Economic Rockstar community. If you're listening to this episode on iTunes or Stitcher Radio, I would love to have some feedback and for you to leave an honest rating and review, as this will help with the rankings of the show so that more people can find it. If you're listening on the website economicrockstar.com, make sure you check out the back catalogue of all previous episodes and interviews with some amazing professors and authors at economicrockstar.com/podcasts. Thanks for listening, and I really appreciate your loyal support. I know how much you love audio, so why not get a free audiobook with Economic Rockstar today? I've teamed up with audiobooks.com to bring you this amazing offer. Visit audiobooks.com/Rockstar to download your free audiobook now.